to our panel discussion, multi-faith panel discussion on being human on a sacred journey. And my name is Tom Jones. I'm with the Faith Inclusion Network, and I'll give you my description. I'm an old man with with white hair and glasses. I'm white, have a blue and white checkered shirt on, and so with gray pants. And but I want to welcome everybody. This is something that's really, really important, our multi-faith discussions. And I know for the Institute, the mission is to encourage the interfaith dialogue. At the Faith Inclusion Network, where I work, that is also something that's really important. And as Robert said this morning, disability is a big table. And it has a lot of people at that table. And some of the people at that table come from different faiths. And so that's what we have explored and want to explore today is that intersection of faith and disability, but not just the Christian faith, the Jewish faith and the Muslim faith as well. We find that in some of our discussions that we have much more in common than we do not in common. And so we find areas where we agree. And so as we talk and share experiences, it's really enlightening, and it really is something that's fascinating. And so one of the ways we look at this is that disability is a huge landscape, and we all have our own experiences as we interact with disabilities. And how our faith informs that is something that we want to talk about today. Now, I will tell you that our speakers have gone through, our panelists have gone through great lengths just to get here, and it really does show. I think Bill got in the middle of the night last night, but it really does show their commitment to the Institute, and it really does show their commitment to multi-faith and interfaith dialogue. And so I appreciate all three of our panelists for being here. So one of the things that I will do is introduce our panelists, and I'll start with my colleague on the right, Joohi Tahir. And I've just known Joohi for a little while. She's the co-founder and executive director of MUSN, Muslims Understanding Health and Special Education Needs. And if you go to their website, musn.org, you're going to find the fascinating work that MUSN has done and that Joohi has done in developing this organization. And I think we can all disability organizations can learn a lot just from their website and their work. But Joohi's a graduate of Boston University with a degree in business management. She spent over 20 years excelling in the corporate world, speaking globally about strategies in the marketing field in the UK, Saudi Arabia, Dubai, Malaysia, and Turkey. Joohi turned her talents to become a national advocate for Muslims with disabilities. This led to her involvement in co-founding and appointment as executive director of Muslims Understanding and Helping Special Education Needs. MUSN is a revolutionary nonprofit founded by Sheikh Omar Suleiman. In consult with Sheikh Omar, Joohi had laid out and planned and built the organization. The programs and the services which they now offer at MUSN came from her mind and her planning. With her own family being affected by disability, Joohi has been outspoken over the past 18 years, specifically about the need for inclusion for her daughter who's on the autism spectrum. She started with small community initiatives, talks, support groups, consulting with mosque administrators and mainstream scholars about the need for our communities to be more aware and to be made more accessible for people in our community with disabilities. As a leader of Musson, Joohi advocates and markets the needs for which Musson implements programs and services across North America, promoting inclusion of all members of the community impacted by special needs through awareness, accommodation, and acceptance. She has been a recipient of the MWA 2015 Inspiring Women's Award and top 7 Muslim American women to celebrate 2017. So welcome, Joohi. We're so glad that you're here today. Our next panelist is Bill Gaventa. Bill really needs no introduction. He's well known to all of us, I believe, but I'm going to give him one anyway. Bill's the author, speaker, trainer, and consultant primarily in the arena of faith and disability. He's the founder and father and director emeritus of the Institute on Theology and Disability. So happy Father's Day, Bill.
Kids are rowdy.
He was the director of community and congregational supports at the Elizabeth M. Boggs Center on Developmental Disabilities in New Jersey from 1995 to 2013. Primary areas of experience and expertise include spiritual and faith-based supports with people with disabilities, training for clergy, seminarians, and community services, staff, aging, and end-of-life grief issues in intellectual and developmental disabilities, cultural competence, and community building. That's a mouthful, Bill. He served as the president of the American Association of Intellectual Developmental Disabilities from 2016 to 2017, and the first president of the Disability Ministry Network in 2023. He was editor of the Journal of Religion, Disability, and Health for 14 years and is the author of Spirituality and Disability, Recovering Wholeness, published by Baylor University Press in 2018. He's currently working on another book on preaching and disability, and that will be coming out next year, and a book well worth checking out. And then our last panelist is Shelly Christensen, a longtime member of the Institute and contributor. Shelly is the Senior Director of Faith, Inclusion, and Belonging at Disability Belongs, a disability-led nonprofit. Shelly's a pioneer and leader in the faith, community, disability, and mental health inclusion movement. Her passion for this work is anchored by her experiences as the parent of a child with autism. Long before she was an emerging leader in the field, Shelly was trained as a parent advocate and unwaveringly holding the school accountable for her son's rights to a free and appropriate public education as mandated by IDEA. The family synagogue and religious school their 3 sons attended treated all children with equity and respect, seamlessly adapting education to meet each child's needs and ensuring a lifelong connection to their Jewish identity and community. In 2009, Shelly co-founded Jewish Disability Awareness, Acceptance, and Inclusion Month, better known as JDAIM. She's the author of From Longing to Belonging, a practical guide to including people with disabilities and mental health conditions in your faith community. Shelly lives in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area with her husband, Rick, and their 2 Shelties, Panina and Caleb. Interesting names there. They are the proud parents of Aaron and Nancy, Jake and Zach, and super proud grandparents of Eli, Isaac, Anna, and Eve. So welcome, panelists. We've got a wealth of knowledge sitting here, and I hope that we can encourage you to share some of that knowledge with us today. I want to ask you, first of all, to share some of your experiences and some of your work. What's the impact of the work, the various work that you've done? And share some a success or celebration that you are particularly fond of? Sure, go ahead, Shelly.
We're starting at this end and then well, thank you, Tom. And it's such an honor and a delight to be here with Joohi and Bill. And um, so I'm the Senior Director, Faith and Spirituality at Disability Belongs, and we work in the multi-faith area. So that work is not about particular theologies, but it is about accessibility and meeting people's access needs. And I think that the question, the impact of my work, I think looking back over almost 24 years of doing this kind of work, um, it's how it started to catalyze in one community where I'm from in Minneapolis, and it became something that really was embraced in many Jewish communities. And when you ask what we're most proud of, I think that in 2009, I became the co-founder of Jewish Disability Awareness, Acceptance, and Inclusion Month. And it catalyzed the Jewish community. I think there were 8 Jewish communities around the country that held an event. We chose February. Why February? Such a bad month for weather, but it was the one month that we could really devote to disability at the time, awareness and inclusion. So it grew and grew and grew, and there were programs and things happening every February. And because of JNAME, Jewish organizations really became stronger in their commitment to inclusion. And so I'm really very proud that this early work that I was involved in brought so many colleagues into Jewish spaces. And it brings us to today and the challenges and the opportunities to shift priorities to accessibility, inclusion, and belonging. Raising awareness, you're always going to be telling people and informing people. Actually, you aren't. Disabled people are supposed to tell these stories because this is disabled people's lives we're talking about. And the impact of my work, I hope, drives that change to address ableism and to make sure that disabled people and allies are at tables, that not just tables, but are creating a movement across faiths to finally take their place in the richness of whatever faith they ascribe to or whatever community they ascribe to. And that, I hope, is the impact of my work. It certainly is what drives me.
I just want to say, if anybody wants to move up closer, you're welcome to do that. A little moving around the room, you feel like a long ways away, and whatever. And you need to help us keep this lively. This is a panel after lunch. There's two. So I'm an ex-Southern Baptist missionary kid who grew up in Nigeria, who ended up thinking that all Americans were Southern Baptists before I moved back here. Came back to discover, lo and behold, that in Louisville, Kentucky, my high school was 1/3 Catholic, 1/3 Jewish, and a few Baptists and some other Methodists and Presbyterians and folks like that. So the paradox of my growing up is to be both parochial and kind of universal at the same time, of crossing cultures and crossing worlds. In Nigeria, as a white boy, I was the stranger and the different one. In our part of the country, the word for white person, when we would go out on Sunday morning to visit village churches out in the bush, all these kids would come running up behind our Land Rover yelling, "Oyibo, Oyibo, Oyibo." And Oyibo in that part of the world literally meant peeled one. If you think about what's normal in Black Africa, well, white, the only closest thing we can think of is the Black person who's been peeled, or pink. That's the change. If you wear pink underneath, kind of the shared, that kind of thing. So it was an early lesson about difference being defined by context, and also by what you think. And I went. So I went to Baptist University, and then decided to get as far away from the Southern Baptists as I could, and went to Union Theological Seminary in New York City, partly to try to go back to New York and see if I could come back into the country again as now an American Studies major, and trying to all of this was about figuring out what it meant for me to be an American and figure out kind of what my sense of call was. Thought I was headed towards parish ministry, and then did a year of clinical pastoral education in North Carolina, where one of my assignments was for a tenth of my time for the whole year to be a chaplain at the Division for Disorders of Development and Learning, which was what is now one of the University Centers of Excellence in Developmental Disabilities. In those days, an early interdisciplinary research and diagnostic center. The Kennedys had started it back in the Kennedy era, so I'm dating myself. This was only about 10 years after that, in fact. And I got sent there against my will. I didn't know what the words meant at first. There was no carved out chaplain's role, so I had to go and figure out what to do. And in the midst of a very tight, multidisciplinary medical model of disability in the 1970s. So it was out of listening to families in observation rooms behind one-way mirrors while their kids were getting different kinds of tests that I began to hear these stories about their faith journey or their church as I kind of bumbled around trying to ask questions about their own faith journey. And what I heard horrified me, and that sort of kicked in then to my missionary kid, let's go save the world, do something with this kind of background, and off I went, or off I was hooked. If you don't know Thomas Merton has a photograph that he labeled as the only known picture of God in the universe, which is a picture of a landscape. You can look it up online. Picture of a landscape, and hanging down in the midst of that picture right there is a hook from a crane. So you think about the hook, whatever comes in, and you are hooked or called. And that's sort of have meant a lot to me. So from that, off then to Rochester, New York, where my wife had good Rochester people here. I was their grandparents, but I walked into a chaplaincy job, Protestant chaplain in the Newark State School, Newark Developmental Center, 30 miles out of Rochester. That was one of the old hellhole institutions that had about 1,500 people in the space that there had once been 5,000. Day rooms are bedrooms with 40 beds to a room, no dividers. Just kind of one of those old hellhole places. And from there went into Rochester, as many people from those old institutions were being repatriated, in New York's words, out into the community, back into the community, and became the chaplain and coordinator of religious services, working to try to build bridges with different faith communities. And that's where I began to work closely with people in the Jewish community, and Roman Catholic community, and where began to say, the best way for me to say this is that some of the holiest experiences I've had in my life have been in non-Christian settings. Now, we can talk about those, but it's true in terms of some of the experiences that I've had in Jewish settings or in other, you might call very secular settings, in a variety of ways. But that's where I began to have to say, how do we work with each tradition? And how do we help people from each tradition? How do I work to help people reclaim people kind of as their own? We had a guy named Sam who had been brought up from Brooklyn and put in Craig Colony because he had CP back a long time ago. And Sam came to Monroe Developmental Center, and he would come to me and say, "Bill, hi, I'm Bill." He said, "I'm Sam." And I said, "I'm Bill, I'm a chaplain." He said, oh, something about, I said, so you're part of a synagogue. Oh, he said, no, but I can sing you a song. And he starts singing Jewish songs. And then he would want to say, do you know my people? And these are my people. And he was trying to can you help me get back to my people somewhere in Brooklyn? That kind of sense of how do we get back to community? And one of the most memorable early experiences was helping take 5 or 6 people to their first Rosh Hashanah service that they had ever been to in their lives. And the miracle of that moment was those folks that were totally accepted. And afterwards, Sam wanted to kiss the Torah, biggest holiday event of the year. Rabbi, can I kiss the Torah? Wanted to make kind of a scene. And right down at the front, while he was doing that, was also a family. And it turned out they wanted their son to be able to see the Torah. And that family was just refugees and exiles from Russia. So you had 2 different sets of people coming around Rosh Hashanah wanting to be able to touch and kiss the Torah. And it's those kinds of moments in different kinds of settings where you see a connection between people that is just so much broader than, and so that since then, I guess one of the things I've called myself is a deinstitutionalized chaplain. Is that if people have moved out into community, so have I, and along with different ways. And most of my work has been wearing secular hats and religious hats and trying to build a bridge between them, which meant building bridges between all faith communities and the secular world in particular, who don't understand faith communities. If you think the lingo in the disability world is bad, wait till you be in the disability world and try to understand the language in the faith communities. You know, the variety and helping people understand and to be able to find a language to talk to each other. And so that's been part of my passion. That was part of the reason for the journal, to try to get started so people from different voices. I didn't start it. A guy who started, it was first name Rehabilitation, Religion, Disability, and Rehabilitation. And but he started it, and then about the second issue, he got too ill and died not too long after that. And I ended up with it. And from that to then a failure in Pennsylvania of a grant project that I was working on, that I had written for a grant to help train the next generation of clergy in Pennsylvania from the DD Council. And I wrote this grant that had me going around the different seminaries for different semesters and trying to help teach a course, which made no physical and psychological sense to me living in New Jersey, and which I found out pretty soon the hard way. And then said, we've got to do something different about this. Plus the fact that seminaries weren't just going to let this guy walk in and teach a course, of course. And we said, let's do something else and try to bring the best people together in the world who know theology and disability, and see if we can attract, pay for, bribe people from seminaries and anybody else who wants to come. And that's how the Institute started.
Okay. Thanks,
so
Bill.
I'm going to stop there.
Okay.
Okay, salam, peace, good afternoon. Just checking to see if we get a pulse, if everyone's still awake. Lunch was great. It was light, but it was lunch, so I know we're kind of all crashing now. But first of all, just want to tell you what an incredible honor it is to be here speaking with this powerhouse panel. I have my fellow board members here from the Faith Inclusion Network, and Tom and Shelly, and we have Rebecca out there and others, and have come across people like Bill Gaventa, Dave Morstad, who some of you know, and I can tell you honestly, it's really important that we have this space to share from each of our faith traditions. And so I thank you all for that opportunity and for having us all have a seat at the table, at the same table. I I'm going to just preface my remarks with, I am not what you'd consider an alima, which is an Islamic scholar. I am not a person with an identifiable disability. I'm an advocate. My experience all comes from life experience of being a mother and a family member of someone with a disability. And after hearing the two speakers earlier today, both Miriam and Robert, and sharing, I feel very inadequate because honestly, how can you speak on behalf of someone? And I struggle with this, and I've struggled with this for the past 25 years. My daughter, one of my three beautiful daughters, lives on the autism spectrum. She has autism. She is someone on the autism spectrum. And she has very low verbal skill. Can she communicate? 100% she can communicate. Can she tell me the thoughts from the deepest corner of her heart? She cannot articulate that. So I do my best, and I am, surrounded by beautiful families and people. So I'm an advocate, and my work has, my personal life has led me to this shift in my career and wanting to advocate and co-found this beautiful organization. And so to answer the question, the impact of the work of Mohsin and successes and celebrations, there was such a stigma in the Muslim community, as there has been in other communities, about disability. There was shame, there was denial, there was fear. You saw by the numbers, 1 in 10. Our studies show the numbers are a little bit higher, but we just don't know. Last I had read from a reputable source, there are more than 500,000 Muslims living in America with a disability, and I'm sure the numbers are even higher. But we never were seeing this significant segment of the Muslim community come out to our events or be seen or be visible. And now I can honestly say that over the last 10 years of doing this work, there has been such a shift in that. And I do want to share that as a celebration. No, everything is not perfect, and it can't be. But it's shifted significantly in the numbers we're seeing, in the people we are seeing that we support, who come out for help, who come out not just to have the support, but to actually provide their expertise in things. We're able to amplify their voices, and it is really powerful when you see who we have out there in our various communities. What we wanted to do was put into practice what we all knew was part of our faith. And empowering, including, is part of our history and our tradition. And we just needed to get back to that. Muslim families and individuals living with disabilities now have a united voice. Through our organization, nothing existed like it before across the Muslim faith. We have imams who are literally going through training. Imams are the religious leaders in mosques, going through training. They have set guidelines for inclusion and accommodations in mosques across North America. There are families like mine and for my daughter specifically, who participate fully in most places of worship, in most aspects of worship, in recreation and just community building and gathering. The communities that we have across 140 cities now are enriched with a diversity of voices, which is what we've always wanted. Those voices bring blessings that I can't even describe. They enhance our sacred journey across the board. Sunday school is now possible equitably with an exclusive curriculum that we've put into place. Brothers and sisters who are deaf and blind and of all different disabilities have a place. There are classes and conferences that are welcoming, and there are weekly activities consistently happening that can accommodate for these family members and for these individuals. I do want to do a special shout out to our ASL interpreters, by the way. They're amazing. They're keeping up, and they're providing such a needed service. So for whoever's online using it, I hope you're finding it helpful, and please tell me if I'm talking too fast. We also provide caregiver mental health support. So these are successes. When people are coming out saying, I'm a caregiver and I am burnt out. And so it's not just the individual, but it's the whole family that's impacted. And I do want to say that a lot of our programs attract non-Muslims, which is also a huge success in my opinion, because it shows the universality of what we're talking about. We run out of Chicago, where I'm based, we run a young adult day program. And it's for people who transition out of the school system who may not be a candidate for employment or for college. They come in, we do vocational activities, we do life skill training, and I proudly say 80% of our young adults are non-Muslim. They know they're coming to an organization that was founded based on our faith principles. I'm not teaching them Islam in that program. I'm just giving them a productive day, and they're flocking to it, and they're referring friends and family to it. If we're in a caregiver coffee and there's a mom who walks in who's not Muslim, I'm going to embrace her just like every other mom, because that's what our faith teaches us. So these are successes, and this has been kind of the impact that Mohsin has had, and these are really our celebrations. And I'm really, really proud of the team and the ability for all of us to be able to adapt and to also to share with other faith communities what we're doing and learning from other faith communities also.
Thank you, Joohi. One of the things that I've heard the stories of all three of our panelists, which have been really transforming. I've heard Shelly talk about as a parent, some of the parent struggles. I've heard Joohi share her story at a conference, and then I've heard all of Bill's stories once or twice too. So, but no, it's the sharing of stories. I think that when Joohi was talking, Shelly was talking, they're dealing with the same issues that we are in West Texas, rural West Texas, and the parents are the same, the professionals are dealing with the same thing. So knowing these stories really help us form relationships, and I think that's one of the biggest things that we want to accomplish through these panels and through our discussion is the forming of the relationships and understanding one another. And so it leads me to my next question here. How does your faith, what are some of the beliefs that your faith espouses or tenets of your faith that drive you as you serve those who have disabilities or the disability community? What is it about your faith that gives you that mandate and is the impetus for your work?
Thank you for asking that question, Tom. I think faith and spirituality are so personal. And I just I don't necessarily go, okay, this is what Judaism says about inclusion, or this is how you interpret the text. I don't care about that so much as what so many faiths say, that all humans are created in the image of, and fill in the blank. So when I first started in this work, I used to ask people, we ascribe to this idea in Genesis that all people are created in the divine image. And I would look at them and say, what does that say about the divine? And Robert talked about the disabled God this morning. Of course, Nancy Eichland's iconic book. It's so personal. And it's so what that transforms, how that transforms me is that I fight for justice. The work that we do acknowledges that there's just a lot of, I don't even want to say misinformation. There's a lot people don't understand about disability. What is it? They don't understand that disabled people have hopes and dreams and contributions to make to this world. And so I think the thing that frustrates me the most always are gatekeepers. And if you're a gatekeeper, I don't know. And none of us are. No, seriously, gatekeeping is really the manifestation of ableism. So when and I also want to say too, that a lot of the disability movement may have been started by parents but parents are not the ultimate dis- arbiter of accessibility, inclusion, and belonging. It's the disabled community, and I say that because when I was 43 years old, and I'm well past that age, you can tell by my white hair and my whatever, that I became a member. No, I acknowledged my membership in the disability community proudly. I was diagnosed with ADHD and subsequently depression and anxiety. And if anybody says, "Oh, you know, those aren't real," then as Robert talked about, society disables us. I like to also say that I'm just me. That's it. I'm me. And one of my callings, the crane for me, is to do this work. So my work has really always been focused on changing the narratives and countering beliefs and attitudes that discount human beings as less than. And so what I'm really excited about, the work that I do at Disability Belongs, and my colleague Ben Bond, who is back there also, we're the small but mighty faith and spirituality focus area. I get to focus on redefining those narratives and about and with disabled people. And we do teaching, we do consulting, and we support faith-based organizations and communities, but we also work in tandem with Faith Inclusion Network and other convenings amongst faiths. And I want to, this is how universal everything is. So I'm going to plug something I'm so proud to have worked on, along with Bill and a number of people online, and Tammy, who's here, and Diane and Patty. This year, the AAIDD Religion and Spirituality Interest Network, of which we are all members, developed a video series called Seasons of Grief. And Seasons of Grief, which you can find online either at disabilitybelongs.org or at aaiddreligion.org. It's so good we had it in two places. It really addresses the universality of grief and loss, ambiguous grief and loss that is obvious by loss of a person and death. But it really digs deep down into that. And the reason for that is because so many people do not have access to their spiritual supports. It's just a part of life that is essential for every single human being. And yet, again, this is one part of life that the gatekeepers have interceded. And so really, I think our work, all of our work, is to address the gatekeeping, societal ableism, calling it what it is in whatever, wherever we're speaking, wherever that current landscape is, to put the notion, the idea that disabled people are just like anybody else, wanting to belong, wanting to choose where they belong and what they do. So yeah, I think we're digging deeper. We're going beyond that surface of raising awareness and months for disability awareness and inclusion. I don't even like to talk about inclusion anymore. It's so watered down. So it's accessibility and it's belonging. And when people have access in a way that creates a point of access, one person by one person, then the door is open for belonging and contribution. So I'll leave it there.
I'm going to mess up the order. I don't have to go this way. You're next.
Yeah.
You're next.
So I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach, and that's what makes this beautiful because it's diverse. So my faith, back to the question, how do my beliefs guide me in this service and in this work? My beliefs guide me in my day-to-day everything. That's the way Islam is for me personally. And I agree, Shelly, it's a very personal, spirituality is something that's very personal. So you meet a Muslim, you meet another Muslim, we may be quite different. I'm gonna recite something very short from the Quran, and then I'll translate. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. This is a very short prayer, and it means, "O Lord, untie the knot in my tongue so that I may convey the message clearly and so that I may be understood." Who said it? Moses. You get the prize. Can she get a prize, please? So the reason I mention that is a lot of us share in knowing that that's something that Moses called upon God for. It struck me, and I had said this in a previous panel, and I've been fortunate again to do some of this work before in a few spaces. So there are so many similarities I noticed when we talked among Christians and Jews and Muslims. So many of our stories are the same. Well, a lot of us believe that the source is the same. Across faiths, we have agreement on Moses. In the story of Moses, and please correct me if I misspeak, the Torah describes him as heavy of the mouth and heavy of tongue, which has been interpreted by some as a speech impediment, probably a stutter or a lisp or a stammer. From the Bible, most authorities consider these quotations to mean that he stammered, and it's the same in Islam. So we plan our way of life and our dealings all in accordance, we Muslims, with what we're taught in our faith. So from our work life to our business dealings, to our family, our interpersonal relationships, our financial matters, our movement in society, it's all guided by our faith 24/7. There's a hadith, which is a saying of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. None of you truly believes until he wishes for his brother what he wishes for himself. Guess what? From the Bible and the Torah, again, please correct me. I did some research, but correct me if I misspeak. John 4:21. And this is the command we have from him. Whoever loves God must also love their brother and sister. This reinforces the point that loving God and loving others are not separate commands, but rather part of the same love. The core of this principle is the golden rule found in Matthew 7:12. So whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them. This means we should treat others, including our brothers and sisters, with the same kindness and compassion and respect that we desire for ourselves. Is this guiding my life's work? This is the advocacy that I had to put into play for my daughter. This is the empathy that I needed to build in our community. I walk around saying disability is one of the largest minority groups. We can all become a part of at any moment. You can be born with it. You can develop it. It can be created by illness. It can be created by injury. And it can be brought on by old age. And it can come for no reason. So are any of us sitting here immune to disability? No. Again, empathy, how important is that? In Judaism, the concept of loving your neighbor as yourself is a core principle, and it emphasizes treating others with kindness just as you would want to be treated. This is rooted in the Torah, from what I know. Go ahead. Yeah.
V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha.
Thank you.
There you have it.
So essentially, and just to close the answer, it's following my faith to work in this space for me. I say I have the best job in the world, the best of this world, and hopefully, God willing, the best of the next world. You work to make better communities while we all walk this journey. Our work teaches us empathy and how to think of more than just ourselves. This is a human principle. This is not tied to any one religion, and that's why I believe it guides the work that I do at Muslim.
So you heard my story about getting hooked into this area. I think the key thing for me the key things I always go back to. People often ask me, Bill, how did you ever get involved in this? What got you in it? And I will talk about that story. But then, as I will say, what I've learned over the years, is that as I was trying to walk with and work with other people to help them find a sense of community and belonging, I was working out my own crap. You know, because here was a lonely missionary kid, came to the States, didn't know what was, quote, typical or normal, scared to death to talk, because I was convinced I was so different, and went to college, at least grateful to start off on the same foot with everybody. And by then I knew not everybody was Southern Baptist. And so, but that sense, and there's a guy who's comes out of the area of disability. His name is Dan Anderson, Don Anderson, who's got a book called The Gift of the Teacher, or Discovering Your Gift or something. He comes out of working in intellectual disabilities and is now totally focused on helping people find their gifts, everybody. And one of the things he says in that book is people's gifts often come on the flip side of somebody's gifts is their core pain. The flip side of your core gift is your core pain. And that certainly resonated for me, that if my gift is to help people find and come to community and broaden our community, that comes out of my own working my stuff out. And hopefully I'm doing it without putting it on other people, but are working on it together in a kind of partnership. The second belief, and then related to that, is you cannot get to belonging without hospitality. And the hospitality to the stranger, which is across the three desert traditions, which was, in order to be alive, you had to be hospitable to the stranger and coming out of a desert. And that whole particular thing, and besides, strangers make things a whole lot more interesting. If everybody was the same, it would be really boring. And then the third for me is the sense in which our traditions always kind of expect the great reversal. That the things we think are going to be or turn out to be the opposite. The way our perspectives get reversed and changed. So I grew up thinking I had to get it all together in order to be accepted. And it took me till I was in my 40s to learn what happened when I completely fell apart, even though I was working with people with pretty severe limits. And if you want to talk about the personal experience of disability, I'm perfectly glad to talk about it with anybody, but I don't, and it's because of 2 times of major journeys into a major clinical depression, into psych hospitals, ECTs, the whole 9 yards, 2 times in my life, separated by 15 years. This is more than 15 yards. And that sometimes I tongue in cheek says that was a profound experiential exercise I had no intention of having. But what it did, the lesson there for me is that we're all dependent. We're all creatures. There's no such thing as independence. There is no such thing as independence. And we've got to understand that we're all dependent and interdependent. And so it's those 3 really: the belonging, hospitality, and the dependence and creatureliness of all of us.
Okay, thank you, Bill. I really enjoy hearing how our experiences have really shaped us. Our beliefs and faith have really shaped the way that we act out our lives in service and in serving those with disabilities and the disability community. So we have a few more questions, but I want to let the audience know that we intend this to be kind of interactive. So if you have a question, we'd like for you to raise your hand, and so that you can interact with our panelists as well. So that's an invitation for anybody to to start interacting with our panelists. And while you're percolating and thinking about those questions, I'll ask one more question. Yes.
I guess. So I'm Rachel. No,
Oh,
everyone's
microphone.
looking at me.
You get it.
Rachel, microphone.
Microphone, Rachel.
Oh, okay. So okay. So I don't know if I should say my background, but I was diagnosed 30 years ago with Asperger's, and now blah blah blah. I've been working in disability services for a long time, and I kind of know Bill, uh, but what do you do with So there's a very strong fear in the disability community of any kind of religious institution, really. And the fear is just automatically, I'm going to be excluded. I'm not going in that place. I'm not entering that place. I'm not dealing with these people. They're not going to accept me automatically. Majority of people that I know who I've worked with. How do you bridge that gap of just helping people trust and helping people come into communities with trust and helping them get to that point where they feel accepted and loved and aren't afraid just to even just step in the building. You know.
Good question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Really important. I'm going to say something that sounds quite surprising. You don't need to take a step into the building. We're going to meet you where you're at. And I know that sounds counterintuitive to bringing people back into faith. I'm going to give you a live example. So during the holy month of Ramadan, there's fasting going on. And it's a very celebratory month as well as a holy month. There are a lot of prayers that go on. People are starving all day and feasting all night. But we used to have what we call iftar, which is the breaking of the fast for 30 nights. And a lot of the mosques around the country will make it very festive, and especially on weekends, there are large gatherings. This is a huge, huge stumbling block for people who are not used to being in the mosque, number one, who have some trauma around when they tried to last come into the mosque. So we decided as an organization to not force people to come into the building. Instead, we did an iftar at a restaurant. And we said, let's try this out. But what did those individuals gain? They gained community, and they gained people that perhaps had a similar life experience. And I'm going to give you some numbers. We had like 30 people show up at the first one. We had 50, 60 people show up. And what they were surrounded by people who they felt very comfortable around. We just took the trauma away because we didn't ask them to come into that mosque. Maybe they might see that mosque leader or that imam or that community auntie who said something bad, who they didn't want to really be around. So we brought the community out and had people feel very comfortable. This past Ramadan, I spoke at an iftar. There were 350 people there, but it was back in the mosque. Why? Because we said on our terms, you know what, perhaps the rest of the community, they can have Sunday night, we'll take Saturday night. And I'm not trying to be like exclusive here. Some people it works to integrate and be a part of what's going on. Some people, I'll tell you, people with sensory processing issues, people, you know, like my own daughter, she could not handle that. So we did things on a different scale and in perhaps third spaces, which is not, it's in the Muslim community, that's considered almost a swear word or a bad word, is, oh, you're pulling people out of the mosque. No, we're going to do this because they're still ours, like we were saying. We want them. And that really helped in our own background. And there, like I said, there are several events now happening with hundreds of people showing up because we gained that trust and they feel comfortable and they were surrounded by love and compassion. And that's all they ever wanted. So just from what we did.
Thank you. 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 Thank
a lot of that oral tradition goes back centuries about not being welcome or being excluded or whatever. Uh, and and it didn't help that the faith community opposed the ADA in this country. So you've got an oral tradition there that people with the activists and people with disabilities really remembered, and I've sort of been fighting against that for years in some ways. And I think Robert sort of gave us the answer this morning. You've got to kind of get out of where you are and go where they are, but also you've got to prepare to hear the rage and the wounds. And the church or synagogue or anybody else has got to be able to say, tell me about that fear and what's behind it. And I'll sit here while you tell me or tell other people, because that's, I believe in a God who we can get angry at. So that's, one of the things. But and then the only other hopeful thing is there are a lot of people talking about this now. Come join us. We don't have all the answers.
I'll make this quick too. There are so many little communities cropping up. They're faith-based. They don't meet in buildings. They meet in community centers. They meet at parks. They meet in a lot of different places. And those are, that's like community. It's not necessarily a hierarchy. I think we run into problems when there's hierarchical structures. And so how do you find those places? I mean, that's, it's, sometimes it's a ton of research, and who has time for that? But there are places that are safe. And I think that's the thing, to go back into a building where one has been traumatized. I can have experienced that too. I ask myself, why do I want to be here? They don't want me. They don't see me. And I think that's a reality. So our agency, our hope, our dreams, what we want, we want to be where we're seen and we're heard, and where they are, as Ginny Thornburg always said, where people know our name.
But I've been doing
There you go.
Yeah, mics are weird. So I've been doing programs, young adult. I actually ran a program that was kind of similar to yours. It was a job training program in Albuquerque, and it was called VOTMOS. And now I've moved on and have my own nonprofit. It's a Albuquerque Disability Arts is what it's called. And my idea is, because of this kind of feeling that so many people have, is we're just going to have community, we're going to have fun, we're going to enjoy each other, and we're going to come back to us if the Holy Spirit comes in, then the Holy Spirit comes in. Because I feel like a lot of times, as soon as you put faith or religion or denomination or stamp on something, people are immediately scared. So start from the beginning, make a community, have some fun together, express yourself through the arts, do open mics where people feel comfortable, because we have open mic nights every 2 weeks now. And it is actually in a church, but it's not religious. It's just, we happen to be in a church, but we're just a community. And we also have other things that we do too. We're trying to do classes and all that stuff. But to me, start with the basics, get people together, get people feeling safe in a community, and God will show up. So,
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. The lack of not knowing where to go or where you can go is just so important. And I know a lot of faith and disability organizations try to provide that for people, kind of a database. And I know that's something Muss and Musson does really well, and as far as identifying inclusive mosques. And do you want to say a little bit about that?
Look it up, boston.org. No, I want
Yeah.
to give the audience a chance, so yeah,
Yeah.
look at all of the listing on the website. Yeah, thank you though.
You're welcome.
And I'd just like to add, not only do people with disabilities, I think, feel like that, but there are a whole lot of people who are work in this field who grew up in faith traditions, who then have heard enough stories or there have been enough things change that they have moved away from claiming or being able to talk about any part of how their faith tradition informs their work and vice versa. And that's, for me, has been the whole importance of trying to find the language of spirituality where people can talk about those core issues and then begin to maybe interpret those issues through different faith traditions and so on. But there are a lot of, we're in a system where people don't have places to talk about meaning in their work.
What's another question?
Online.
Okay. What have you seen as the biggest change? I'm an old man, but you've been in this field a lot longer than I have, and so what changes have you seen in the faith and disability world?
I would say the biggest change has moved away from institutional inclusion and the focus on what faith communities have control over to make their spaces accessible and doing that for people. I think it's always been problematic. It's always been an issue, but there's in some spaces, and this is why this work is so, it's almost like a roller coaster in some spaces. There are lay leaders and trustees saying we can't afford the ramp. It's like nobody's asking for a ramp, right? So we are advocating and pushing, working so hard not only to provide these institutions with guidelines on accessibility. This is what you can do, but most importantly, what you need to do as an organization, as an institution, is to ensure that people's voices are heard and that you sit down and you have conversations with people and you ask this one question. Just if you take nothing else from what I've babbled about today, the one question always is, what is important to you? It is not what is important to you in this faith community. It's not what is important to you for what you like to eat. It's not that. It's the basic what's important to you. And from that stems conversation. And it moves the institutional folks from the power structure to really being in conversation, working together with people, all people, to make whatever the institution is or the organization is really a house of prayer for all peoples. Thank you, Psalms. Thank you, Isaiah.
Biggest changes, the huge number of people now working in this arena and faith communities at different parts of that journey. The huge number of resources now compared to 20 years ago that are out there. And the most exciting change for me is there are a huge number of you newer and younger voices who are coming in and speaking, and like this morning and other times, and that's a joy to see.
Okay. Any other questions online or? Go ahead.
Online, maybe? I don't know. My question was, now I could be wrong, but I believe that if you look in the Torah and the Christian Bible and the Quran, I believe parts of it are kind of exclusive. It's not all, we're all one loving family. Come on, let's get together and live out God's love. There are exclusive parts where I know that I'm not supposed to be a minister, according to some parts of the Christian Bible. And So my contention is that people, the monotheistic believers, the reason why they have those exclusive tendencies has to do with people with disabilities are a theological problem when they show up, particularly if their disabilities, you can see it, obviously, a physical impairment or whatever, you can see easily, because why did a loving God make a person like that? And it's always presumed that they're sad or unhappy or whatever, you know. They're having a disability is tragic for them. And it is for some people, but it's not for others. But I was just wondering your take on that. How do we change the attitude of that do we address it, just say, do we come out and say that's what I think and we need to change this, or what? How do we that embedded belief system?
I think we have time for some quick responses here.
Well, you shouldn't have been a minister by the Bible because you're not a Levite and you wear glasses. Yeah, because it's not having anything to do with whether you're a Christian or not.
Cohen.
Whatever, but so according to the Leviticus passages, which do everybody, almost none of us in this room could be minister, or none of us. I don't know any Kohens around here. Do you? You are one.
Dispute that, but.
Okay.
Let me explain. My great-grandfather was a Kohen. My grandmother, in some Jewish circles, would be considered a Kohenet, my mother, and then me. And so I've fallen into that because I don't like people telling me who I can be.
But I think you're right that it raises all kinds of theological questions, and that people are scared of that.
Anything? Okay.
I haven't
Well-
figured out the answer either.
Great questions. And sometimes that outlook is, we see it in the denominations and the being gatekeepers of people who are called to ministry but have a disability. And so, but I think we're making some progress. Progress seems to be real slow, but we're making progress. And I know we have people here that are doing wonderful things in their denominations, in their faiths. And so that's what's something to be celebrated. And I think all faiths and all of us can celebrate those advancements and the growth that we've seen. There's a lot of growth that still needs to happen, but I guess as in James, all that growth comes from God, and then so we're a little bit more impatient sometimes. So, but I want to thank Bill and Joohi and Shelly for participating on this interfaith panel, and thank you for sharing some of your story and your experiences and wisdom.
So
So
I'll leave a challenge to people. One is, I think, interfaith dialogue. If we can do it in the arena of disability, maybe it can happen in other areas around faith
Yeah.
traditions. So in fact, think about this as one way of making peace.
yeah,
And the people with disabilities, in fact, could be helped to bring peace.
yeah,
And secondly, is if we can't say that we can accept somebody who's an other because of a faith label, how can we advocate for accepting people who we say are other for any other label?
And
Yeah.
to add to that, I know we're going over time, but I want to add to this challenge that Bill has just issued. Get involved in interfaith or multi-faith work in your community, and whether or not it's a disability-oriented interfaith thing, bring disability to it, because those are out there. And the more we come together, the better the world will be.
And a real quick thing, walk the talk. I think one of the things we really, really are seeing is, you know, I don't even want to go down the DEI path and open that can of worms right now. But, you know, as someone who runs an organization, it was really important that we center the voices and have board members who have disabilities. And, you know, that was actually a criticism I received when I co-founded the organization, that you don't have a disability. And I take that, and I took it very seriously. So wherever your sphere of influence, walk the talk and think about empathy and think about, centering those voices and not having to speak for people and bring them on board leadership positions. Finn does panels where neurodivergent people are speaking on the panels. And I think this is something that's really important, what we saw earlier today. And I do want to say, in terms of just the bridge that we build when we do things like this, on a personal note, I was very, very conflicted about coming here in person. And I received so much support. I can't thank my colleagues here enough about just safety and about concerns about the crazy world we live in today. I am someone who is visibly Muslim. There are people here who, follow the Jewish faith that are scared. There's a lot of nonsense going on, but the support and the embrace that I received, and there were offers for rides, there were offers for, just ushering and being with me as I travel and whatnot. I just want to say that that's huge. That goes a long way. And I think if there's one thing we can take back to our communities is let's all practice and put into practice some of that, because that's a first step. And whether it's someone with a disability, someone with a different faith, someone who, is a different race, let's all practice that. But I just want to thank you all so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you. Just want to again thank our panelists. Let's give them a round of applause and show your appreciation for them. And the challenge, I think you've heard, the challenge is, where do you go from here? What will you do when you leave here? If we can do this at the Institute, we can do it in our personal lives as well. Thank you.